Episode 89A. Murphy asks, can we trust our scientific establishment again? The definition of cathartic, a release of strong emotions by an activity. I think Bobby Kennedy, our new Secretary of Health, in interrogating the scientific establishment over their COVID mandates, is providing Americans with a cathartic. In a previous podcast, episode 68, I ranted about the terrible and unfair COVID responses by our political and scientific leaders. This one gets a lot deeper. I am Rod Murphy, and I, like you, lived through the COVID-19 epidemic 5 years ago. I am a longtime critic and a skeptic of politicians and lots of their government actions. I have always been. I grew up poor, almost powerless, but very streetwise. Also, my family was part of a historically discriminated population in Boston, the Irish Catholics, and that further enhanced my skeptical point of view of political and other leadership. So when COVID-19 arrived, my immediate thoughts were that the lockdowns, shelter-in-place policies, vaccines, school closures, and mask mandates were uncalled for and a massive overreach. My real-life experience led me to believe that government officials in our scientific establishment coercing citizens and mandating those measures were most likely incompetent, power-hungry, and possibly malicious, too. Growing up in Boston demonstrated that getting a favor from a politician required his receiving one back. Quid pro quo has always reigned in Beantown. So my take was and is that those restrictive COVID policies coming from the often corrupt but also incompetent federal, state, and local authorities were probably going to financially aid some of their favored constituencies like drug companies. And also that those edicts would be most likely ineffective and would probably cause immense harm, especially to the poor, the sick, and the vulnerable. And maybe even more importantly, that the government-imposed COVID response would be unconstitutional. I was a COVID heretic, and I am discovering that I was right. Many Americans, including me, think the American public's general acquiescence in accepting the COVID-era lockdowns might embolden our political leaders to even worse cockamamie programs. The scientific establishment, who were the experts for those political leaders, are often in the bag to the pharmaceutical industry. That COVID overreach included closing churches and putting retailers out of business, schools being shut down, and citizens being harassed for not accepting the lockdowns. And cui bono, if you follow the money, you will see over-the-top government spending for COVID remedial programs going to politically favored NGOs and companies. I am using strong words here because my civil rights and yours were taken away arbitrarily by those COVID Nazis. This happened in the open with not a peep out of our national media. The overwhelming COVID response separated friends, co-workers, and even families into warring factions according to whether they were COVID response skeptics or not. Most Americans believed that vaccinations, lockdowns, and the requirement to be masked was legitimate. They were either gullible about the government's bullshit or they didn't have the gonads to fight the system. Others, like me, were the skeptics. I became an anti-vaxxer, or more precisely, a vaccine skeptic, and resolutely not a mask wearer. I found many of my anti-vaxxer friends heroic. There are certain traits in those who are willing to think for themselves. In my estimation, those who refused the COVID vaccine, bucked the system, and refused to wear a mask were admirable. Stubbornness is one of those traits. Many friends refused the shot, and they would not wear the ridiculous mask. Some of them were usually mild-mannered and compliant, but on this they became hard-headed in a good way. Another trait that I approve of was the ability to suffer. If you were like me, unwilling to wear a mask, you were constantly harassed, vilified, and insulted. You were denied entrance to stores, offices, churches, and schools. Some folks lost their jobs because of that madness. We skeptics suffered. And another admirable trait is the willingness to stand alone. Some good Americans were forced by the COVID and mask mandates to relocate, to other less psychotic places. Today I see all of those refuseniks as highly principled. We are in deep shit if most Americans cannot discern autocratic government when they see it. We are now 5 years post-pandemic. More than 400 studies on the failure of compulsory COVID interventions show us that the COVID lockdowns, shelter-in-place policies, school closures, and mask mandates have failed in their purpose of curbing transmission or reducing deaths by that disease. According to the research, those restrictive policies were ineffective and instead caused devastating ramifications. Their research indicates that mask mandates, lockdowns, and school closures had no discernible impact on virus trajectories. Again, according to those studies, the benefits of the lockdowns and the restrictions have been totally exaggerated. Instead, the harm to our society and our children have really been severe. Also, the undiagnosed illnesses caused by the faulty actions will result in more deaths in years to come. Lockdown policies cause depression, anxiety, and suicide in our young people. The education of our kids was thrown under the bus. Drug overdoses, child abuse, and sexual abuse have also resulted from that awful COVID response. Nearly all levels of government have attempted compulsory measures to control the virus, but no government can claim success. Lastly, there were massive numbers of deaths, many from deprived populations, and recent medical findings seem to be finding the vaccine itself was harmful. So go, Bobby, go. This is continued on episode 89B. This is Rod Murphy. Thank you for viewing or listening to my podcast episodes. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, and if you so choose, I ask you to send a good review and or refer a friend who might be interested in this Old Boston podcast series. Again, my thanks.